Oh, yeah. Okay, which we're doing.
You're no, oh, you didn't wear your Noel.
Yeah, very.
That's no Noel. I couldn't figure out she has.
What's the sort?
This, really? I don't feel so bad.
You know,
Not just the boards of elections times.
gentlemen that
Okay.
my place on
Hi, nice to meet you, Bonnie.
All right, it is 1:30.
Hi, Becky.
I have to club over here. So I will call the December 13th Jail Juvenile Transition Center Committee meeting to order. Take a roll call, please, Lynn.
Rossler,
Here.
Jasinski,
here.
Summer,
Here.
Mahoney,
Here.
Snyder,
Here.
Wilkins, Kraus,
Here.
Rupp,
Here.
Wilson,
He's excused as a conflict.
Leonard, Warner, Carter,
Here.
McMurray,
Yes, here.
Ford.
Here.
One.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3, approval of the minutes from last week's meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the minutes. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Minutes are approved. Agenda item number 4, discussion on the jail and juvenile transition center and our next steps. Anyone want to start that discussion, or? Go ahead.
Sheriff, as we left yesterday, or excuse me, the last meeting, your comment was you had to take some time to evaluate the staffing piece of that. And I think that's a huge piece of it because it's part of our package to fund it to some degree, and that was heavy on my mind. I don't know much about that, but I'm willing to learn.
Okay, I can go through my brief synopsis, and I might rely on Keith as far as particular numbers, but, you know, we looked at the savings, or what we bring to the package and the payments, so to speak, by staff reductions or minimizing the impact of staff that would be needed. And talking with Heath, depending again on which option we want to go with when, we would be looking at basically 6 to 15 positions, anywhere from 500,000 to 1.2 million. And trying to analyze my way through it, you know, obviously I want to minimize the amount of staff that is impacted. I think we all are on that page. So by going with the best case scenario, the jail being here and all the different options that were available to the base plan, my understanding and my analysis would actually have the least impact on staff reductions. Is that right? Is that okay? So I just want to make sure we're on the same page, because I have not discussed this particular part with Heath. But he can probably help break down the numbers and why that would be in terms of the big picture costs, if you will, versus the piece by piece phase-in cost. You want to help me out here? Yeah.
I think.
Actually, Joe, I think in the breakdown, because those differences are distinct between what's the 1C and the 1D. So if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn over to Joe Marak from RQAW. Any help with that?
No. You might not be able to see when I'm done here.
You want me to put it over here so it's not in the way? Or?
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Again, for the record, I'm Joe Marak, RQAW.
We talked mostly in the previous meetings about option 1D. And there was also an option 1C, and all kind of the differences to them. And basically, both of them are an addition and renovation to the existing jail. Both options include the addition over Pine Street, which would be the new intake and processing center, the new medical and food service. And on the upper second level, we would have a new housing pod of 270 beds. 1C and 1D, that's constant between the two. The only difference between the two options is how we use the basement of the Hall of Justice. In option 1D, which is the lesser expensive option between 1C and 1D, we're continuing to use the existing 160 beds in the basement of the Hall of Justice, doing some minor improvements, some minor renovation down there in the Hall of Justice, and then we're using the upper floors of the existing jail for renovation for the sheriff's offices. Okay. Now, the main difference with option 1D is we are not using the Hall of Justice beds at all. Those 160 beds down here, we're putting all of the beds in the new addition, new 270 beds here, and we're renovating levels 2 and 3 for bed space. And the sheriff's office would then move to the basement of the Hall of Justice. So the difference in cost, basically, is the difference of, let's see if we can find another basement. The basic cost difference is, in lieu of some minor renovation to keep the existing beds in the Hall of Justice, we're gutting it and building office space for the sheriff's office, and then just moving those beds to the jail. So that's the basic difference between the two options. Staffing-wise, it's a little more efficient to keep the beds in the Hall of Justice because they're all dormitories. That's minimum staffing. Staffing in the existing jail will take a few more people because the building is kind of cut up in different configurations. It'll take a couple more staff per floor, basically, just to operate it. So we're not achieving as much staff savings in option 1C by utilizing the existing jail. However, my personal preference is I like 1C, the option of putting all the beds in the existing jail for two reasons. One is we'll have new beds in the new addition, we'll have new beds in the existing building, in two buildings. If we do option 1D, which is the cheaper one, we have beds here, and beds here in three different buildings. So just from a personal preference, I like having all the beds in two buildings instead of three. And that's basically the main difference between the two. But it's not quite as staff efficient as continuing to use the beds in the Hall of Justice.
That comes right to the point. I think the whole idea of this, the initial costs are a one-time thing, but the staff efficiency is an ongoing legacy.
Right.
And to get cheap at this time, I want to eliminate some of these
Yeah.
plans.
Well,
What
as-
I'm after.
Well, as Mr. Kaplan had demonstrated to you, you can afford to do either one from a construction, because what he did is he balanced staff savings with other monies and so forth and demonstrated you can do both. Both of them will work within your financial plan. So it's just a choice of the committee and the commissioners as to which option you tend to pursue. You can spend, you can afford to do either one. But the main thing is, one of our goals when we started was to remove the beds from the Hall of Justice. Well, what option 1D is, you will eventually remove those beds from the Hall of Justice, you just won't do it right now. we're looking at this as a phased approach, a pay-as-you-go approach, so to speak. So those, I don't think those beds will be there forever, but who knows what the definition of temporary is.
The 160 are in the basement.
Yes.
That's the most efficient piece that we have. I cannot imagine taking the next 2 floors and using them for incarceration. I mean, that's...
The 2 floors of the existing
Floors are
jail.
used for incarceration.
Right,
Yeah.
but I cannot, I mean, that's gotta be out of it.
Because what we
Well,
were,
Right? That's my opinion.
what we were.
As far as the plans go, I'm sorry, it's out of it in terms of the style of housing we have there now, if I understand right. The idea would be to take those floors and create more of a dorm type setup, like what we currently have in the basement of the Hall of Justice. I mean, you would move the dormitory component out of the Hall of Justice to those current floors 2 and 3. The more secure beds would be in the new construction.
That's correct. What we would be doing is scrape, we take a little machine, just scrape everything out of the existing jail. All the plumbing, all the HVAC, all the electrical, all the cells, and converting it basically into 3 dormitories plus program space is what we would be doing on each of those floors. Where your existing kitchen is now, that will become a program and recreation, indoor recreation space. And the other areas will just be cleaned up and make dormitories. So we can open it up and get good visibility and be able to staff it with fewer people than it takes to staff it now, when it's all divided up into cells and so forth like you have. The light lines here in this plan represents the floor plan as it is now. We're gonna open all that up.
The other plan also that shows if we don't do anything with the 2nd and 3rd floors of the existing building, they're going to sit basically as they are, and eventually we're going to have to do something with them anyway.
Under the alternates, if we, under option 1D, the alternates would be to put the sheriff's offices in the basement, 1st and 2nd floor of the existing jail, and continue to use the 3rd floor of the existing jail as dormitory housing. So the base bid, the cheapest option, does not include renovating those floors, but if you build the alternates to include the sheriff's office, they would eventually become offices.
I have a question.
So if we renovate, in Plan C, we renovate those 2 floors, there would be 3 dormitories? How many?
There would be 3 dormitories per floor.
So 6 dormitories?
Yes.
If we did some minor renovations to the basement, there would be
Basically, 2 dormitories.
2 dormitories.
But
So
the-
I think the point that I want to make is programmatically,
Right.
this makes more, option C makes more sense. Because your more secure beds, as I understand it, are going to be in the new jail.
That's correct.
Dormitory type really allows for some programming for step down. If you have an all-women dorm unit, people getting ready to transition back to the community and you can integrate some substance use treatment or something like that right in that dormitory, I mean, those models can work really well. So it gives us more program options, I think. That's why I like option C.
Right, and the size of the dormitories are smaller, so you
Right.
can classify inmates separately as opposed to the big dormitories in the Hall of Justice. And your potential programs that you have with them will be more, theoretically, more effective because you're dealing with a more focused
Right.
group of individuals.
I think it just gives us a lot more opportunities for programming.
The other thing it does, in my view, is it puts the flow of housing right next to each other, rather than having housing at the HOJ, administration at the old site, and then housing again at the new construction.
That's correct.
Accurate? So when you're doing, when you're doing inmate movement, you're doing it all basically from one
Secured site.
secure area. I mean, you have a specific secure area for the housing. You're not having to move them from Hall of Justice through the administration area to another housing unit if we have to put them in a higher secure housing or whatnot. It just makes the movement of inmates quicker and safer.
And just to, think of the flow of food during lunch.
Right.
Your kitchen.
Right.
Your kitchen's in this building, and you're moving food to here, and here, and here, if you continue to have inmates in the Hall of Justice. Where if you eliminate these beds, you're not moving food near as much. Medical, moving prisoners into the medical component, you're not moving them near as far as well.
Mr. Jersey?
You know, I'm way out of my element here as to where we gotta go. If I had my brothers, okay, it would be the two gentlemen, yourself and Sheriff Bob Carter, excuse me, that know, that have lived it, that do it day to day, that need, in my opinion, okay, to make that recommendation, what gives us what's best in the 50-year plan. And our 40-year plan, or 30-year plan. I mean, not anybody else has had that experience. And it's not time to get cheap now.
I'll wade into those waters as long as Bob's on shore to throw me a lifeline, okay?
You guys,
Given this location that we're talking about, to me, the best option is to make the old facility dorms, build the new construction, gut the Hall of Justice as a housing unit, and move the rest of the sheriff's operations there to make everything operationally wise centrally located, make the flow of inmates a little more secure so that we're not spread out all over the campus, so to speak. Long term, big picture, we would, there's a lot of things we need to accomplish. We will need Pine Street to accomplish the big picture 40, 50-year plan like you mentioned, because with that, then we have the ability for additional bed builds if the future dictates that. If we have to fall back or move forward and give up being able to use Pine Street, that's gonna limit or basically eliminate any future expansions from what I've looked at. Is that accurate?
Yeah, if you move this housing, right now this housing is on top of Pine Street. If you have to move this east because the city won't vacate this, you're only going to get one more expansion to this plan rather than two potential expansions. So it'll somewhat limit your flexibility into the future.
So the cost of the tunnel that it's going to take to put underneath Pine Street.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
The
not
cost of this connection gets more expensive. And the fact, again, from an operation standpoint, if we go across Pine Street and leave Pine Street open, the tunnel connection actually is going to be on the second floor because there's utilities in the street.
Yeah.
So you're going to move people from intake, move them from the first floor to the second floor, move them across the street, then get into the existing building, then down into the basement, then move them across into the Hall of Justice. And it's just messier.
more dangerous.
Certainly, anytime you're moving inmates and in contact with inmates during movement, that's the most dangerous time in the facility. I've said that. That's not going to change. Mr. Plummer?
There's another thing, even with John's men, I mean, the more you spread them out, I mean, we have less to keep shortening his crew up, so the more you spread them out, the less there is of them to do their job too, so the tighter you can keep them, the easier it is on maintenance.
What was the cost of that plan? If I may.
With the availability of Pine Street?
Yes.
24.
And then the other question that weighs heavily on my mind after a visit from the city or representatives of the city, what are the obstacles to closing Pine Street? I mean, that's another roadblock for us, no?
Well, I mean, the biggest obstacle is the city has a final say. It's their jurisdiction and it's their say. There are some concerns about which businesses and commercial residents would be affected. So I think we have to have a more in-depth discussion with them personally. But along those same lines, while we're having this discussion, I think, and I've kicked this around the past week, we gotta start thinking, okay, if we can't do this, if they don't want us, if they truly don't want us to do it this way, what's our plan B? And the way I see it, plan B would then be take all the operations out to the Roundy's building out there off of at the township site there, Muskegon Township site. Because I don't know, if we can't do it the way that the concept has been presented to us, you know, we're gonna limit ourselves in the future in terms of future needs if we can't get it done that way. So we probably need to go somewhere where we don't necessarily limit ourselves to that extent.
Would you see that as including the juvenile transition center at the Roundy's site as a plan B?
It could, and I'll be honest with you, I'm thinking more of the jail. There is space at that site for new juvenile center construction, but I couldn't tell you the cost of that off the top of my head.
We were looking at putting the juvenile facility where that existing tower was. So there's a cost of relocating that tower. And then the cost of building a new juvenile transition center is right at $9.9 million total project, which is approximately $3 to $3.5 million more than a renovation at Craig School. So if we go to the Roundy's option, obviously the Roundy's option for the jail is more expensive than option 1C or D. And if you build new at the juvenile facility, the juvenile transition center will be more than a renovation at Craig School as well. I don't know if those numbers have been crunched yet or not, as far as what the county's capability is. But the cost difference is, I'd have to go through all my charts here and see, but it's in the millions of dollars to do the difference.
Well, going back to Pine Street and your numbers, Heath, thinking, to me, this is the only one that really makes sense in the long term. Only gonna do it once, let's do it right. Do we have any land acquisition dollars in there?
In the ones for this site here?
Yes, and I'm talking about the most advantageous.
No, the option for the jail, 1C and 1D, have 0 land acquisition costs in there. There were none necessary, therefore they're not in the budget. For the juvenile transition center, we have included in the budget $400,000 if we needed to purchase Craig School.
And I want to get back to Craig School and those obstacles. My thought is Pine Street, can we create an alternative? That whole block, there's nothing of any sustenance there.
Well, I mean, again, I think that's why we really need to sit down with the city leadership and ferret out their concerns about giving us just that block. You know, we're not asking for the entire length of Pine Street, in the section that we would ask for if we go forward with this particular option is it's parking lots. It's county parking lots on both sides. So I'm a little confused about the big negative impact on the local businesses. But again, I'm going into this open mind, and I respect the fact that it's their street, you know, and I don't want this to become an adversarial thing with the city leadership. I don't want this to be a long drawn out legal battle over rights or acquisition or anything like that. So I guess that's one of the reasons I said, as part of this discussion, we also need to be thinking about Plan B. I don't think Plan B should be going toe to toe with the city over Pine Street. It just doesn't make good, relationship sense, doesn't make good political sense in my opinion. So I think we need to also be ready to discuss if they're truly opposed to keeping the jail here downtown, then I see our next best move as the Roundy's building. It's not the one I want.
like that approach, Dean, in terms of, you know, we need to move forward with the city, talk to them, see what their real concerns are, but at some point in time, if they are really opposed, do not want it, then we need to move forward, because we really need, the need here is a jail and a transition center. We just have to go and figure out how we're gonna get there. May not be the best option we have, but if it's nothing we can do, the city, you're right, has the jurisdiction over the street, then we may have to move elsewhere.
Or comments, or?
Yeah, a little history, if I may. I guess I'm along with what the sheriff and Mr. Derazinski are talking about. I think that the issue here is one of two things. The sheriff's responsibility is to run the jail. That's his responsibility according to statute. And the board, for years, has held this as their responsibility, and I think when, in my opinion, I think what we have to do is we have to try to come up with the answer that the Board of Commissioners can live with. When I was a I forget what the plaintiff, I guess, yeah, plaintiff, you know, being retired 10 years, I don't listen to them words anymore. But when I was a co-complainant in the jail lawsuit, one of the things that I did is I did have an architectural firm out in Grand Rapids come over and give us it wasn't anything like you did, Joe, but it was some ideas. One of the ideas was exactly what you've touched on here, is going over Pine Street. And at that time, I didn't hear anything about Pine Street, but nobody really wanted to close it off. They thought about going over and doing all that. So I think that we need to do, like the sheriff said, I really believe we need to do this whole hog. We need to do it, and I think that's where Mr. Derazinski's coming from. Whatever is the best possible all the way around, and not do it piecemeal, because I can tell you that piecemeal has not worked in this community on the jail. It has not worked. Every time you say you're going to do something, something comes along and they're not able to do it, it doesn't get done, and it gets going, and now we got what we have over there in that jail now. And that jail is a real mess. And it's a mess downstairs in this building too. So I guess my point is that I think we need to do as much of this project as we possibly can do, and do it right the first time. And not, I don't like the piecemeal part of it. That's my point.
Approaching the city, and I would think that's something the sheriff and the administrator, and I'll bet some of that's been done behind the scenes.
Bonnie Hammersley, speaking, County Administrator. We have talked with the city, and we have also filled out the application for the vacation of Pine Street that will be submitted today to the City and Muskegon Planning Commission for them to review that. That was the direction that I was given by the leadership at the city to follow the process. We're all about following the process, and that will give us a sense of where they stand by going through the formal process of going through the Planning Commission.
Other comments? And again, my discussion, this main discussion was centered around the whole jail facility, the campus site, where we want to go with the juvenile transition center component.
I'm sorry to be the big mouth at this meeting, but this has been an ongoing thing for how many years?
Long time.
Yeah, a long time. How do we get our input into the planning commission? Are we be on the agenda as a group? Are they going to have a special meeting?
Yeah, I'm sure we would be part of their agenda to present basically the amount of the drawings we have now and the discussion of why we see this as an important option for us to pursue. And again, we would want to hear the questions they have and the comments they have and their concerns. Maybe we could answer some of them at that time and we could be able to research it for them. But I'm sure we would be placed on the agenda. That's a short answer.
Who's gonna be there? Is it gonna be hopefully a very coordinated input from our part?
Yeah, I would suspect definitely I would be there. I think the administrator and the consultant certainly would be there to.
Are we simultaneously doing the same with the Juvenile Transition Center? I take it Muskegon Public Schools owns that building?
They do, as far as I know, they still do.
I guess I'm impatient.
I'll let the administrator.
Yeah, please.
We,
Jeremy called me down, but.
as I said, we submitted our application, or this application is completed. I signed it this afternoon. It should be going over today. We will hear back from the city on the process and the scheduling once they receive our application. The Craig School, we have not submitted anything at this time because we have scheduled a time to visit their neighborhood association meeting on January 16th. And we are going there to listen to the neighborhood prior to submitting a request to the city for rezoning, because it will require rezoning of that area if we were to put a juvenile transition center there.
Madam Administrator, I think when you go to Craig School neighborhood, I think Joe needs to prepare some kind of a building plan or something to show them what it's going to look like if it is in their neighborhood.
We can show you today what that's going to look like if it's in there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I think that we should wait for the response from the city, because you know they'll be talking about Craig School, they're going to be talking about all of this. So we need to wait till we hear from them to see exactly what they're going to say before we go to the neighborhood association, I would think.
Our thought was that we would go we are going to listen to the neighborhood and find out, and depending on what we hear from the neighborhood and bring back to you, we may or may not want to pursue the city's approval on that based on the input. That was our sense, that we felt their input first would be important before we pursued anything at the city level. This is,
Yeah, I agree.
do you have more, is this the
Yeah,
only
more
one?
like a
Yeah,
ground
this
area.
is what we'll be showing them as a renderings of what a juvenile transition center would look like in their neighborhood. And we also,
That's what they need to see.
And we also, one of the practices I've had in construction projects whenever I oversaw them is whenever you work with neighborhood associations, you always request their input during the design phase so that they can have input on how the building will look, because it is their neighborhood. And that would be our offer to them if we get any farther with this issue.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Snyder.
Well, I think it needs to be observed as well that the Craig School as a transition center probably makes sense irrespective of where the jail is in terms of where it is today. I mean, if you couldn't co-locate it, it still may be to your advantage if you wind up at the Roundy's building to have Craig School be the juvenile transition center, and then you'd accomplish some savings and some, I think, some real benefits. Access from the people, most of whom are going to be populating it, their families. It just makes some sense no matter what. So I think we ought to go to the school no matter what. Or we ought to go to the neighborhood association no matter what.
Yeah, I think there definitely has to be, again, a conversation with the neighborhood association and an opportunity for them to voice their concerns and ask the questions prior to any formal
Wasn't the one I thought beside the area where all the, just to the ground there?
That's the one.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. You're right.
Any more questions or comments that Administrator can answer, or I can? Any further discussion on
Just,
these particular options? Go ahead.
just, at one point, the city did apparently gave implicit consent to closing Walton Avenue. That would involve, of course, the acquisition of property and the expenditure of property. Does that take this, is that off the table totally? Do you anticipate that they may come back and say, go west, young man?
Well, I guess that's up to this committee if we want, if that's another thing we want to pursue. Again, my concern is, you know, and Mr. Jazinski hit it in some of his opening statements, is what are we looking at 30, 40, 50 years? I don't want to leave the next sheriff or 5 sheriffs from now, same dilemma that Bob inherited, and, you know, right on down the line. But I think by going north across Walton, we are still going to landlock ourselves, so to speak, in terms of future expansion ability. Is that accurate?
That's right, because in the scenario that we ran moving north, we're only buying half of that block. And so between land acquisition and the cost of relocation of businesses, that was like $2.5 million just to buy half the block. Then, when you need to expand again, you have to buy the Burger King, which has more land acquisition and more business relocation cost. And then you're landlocked there because you're at another street. So this option 1C and D, this direction, gives you much more flexibility as far as the future is concerned than going to the north.
I understand that.
Are you saying that Walnut Street's too expensive?
The Walton Street
Walton Street.
is more expensive because we have land acquisition costs there. The construction costs and the options are relatively the same. The main difference is the land acquisition and business relocation costs that we don't have now, and the amount of expansion capability in the future.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Warner?
When you took a look at expanding across the street there, we're losing parking in the Hall of Justice parking lot and a row of parking across the street. In your study, does it show that we have enough parking remaining across the street to accommodate that loss?
We haven't really studied that in great detail. The discussion was that we can find additional parking space easier than we can find building space. So we can, again, solve the immediate and short-term problem, and if we need more parking, we can probably find it easier and at a lesser cost than finding a building site. I think in the short term, for the first expansion, we're not going to lose a whole lot of parking, so we'll probably be okay for the short term.
Yeah.
Once you expand again, then you're definitely going to need additional parking.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, other discussion? Other comments? Just so I'm clear on what direction this committee wants to go is, the primary direction we want to pursue is working with the city to see if we can get that little section of Pine Street, and then pursuing options, was it C and D? C and D, the base was C and D. Is that accurate? I just want to accurate for the record for the
C and D with the alternates.
And I think also, Sheriff, that we still want to pursue the Craig School option, whether or not.
And then as far as the Juvenile Transition Center, continue to work to try and pursue Craig School as the option, with the understanding that given potential restrictions put on us by the city, or roadblocks, if you will, we would then have to aggressively look at Roundy's or some other site. Is that accurate? Any comments to that effect? Any questions? Okay. So, now we're on to other business. Agenda item 5. Mr. Plummer.
We have a new children's psychiatrist, I believe she is at Community Mental Health, and she brought booklets about children incarcerated parents. She didn't have enough for everybody, so I asked her to order more, and she's going to contact the administrator and maybe give you a little scenario of what this is all about. If we're going to be working hand in hand with Community Mental Health, we may want to look at some of these programs that they're doing around the country and the statistics about the children and the visitation and everything else on where it's going. And so I just wanted to bring it up that it's coming to you, and we need to make sure the design that we may have someplace to accommodate this, and that other option that may work better. So
I'd like to introduce an acquaintance of mine, Dr. Dave Burlingame of Grand Valley. And he's being involved or getting involved with the health initiative, and I think we'll be seeing more of him. He recently gave me this, what I think, this packet, and I think you were at the health initiative meeting this morning, Dave?
I was.
Okay. He also took my place on the bike time board.
He's also a long-time retired Northern Shores police officer, so.
Okay.
I'll try to have us a summary of that, will you, Jen, for this afternoon later on?
Yep, I will. It's 92 pages long.
good summary.
Okay, other business. Anyone? All right, agenda item number 6, public comment. Do you have any sheets there, Lynn, for public comment, or are there any to fill out? I'm not sure if they were available. I didn't check. If there's anyone in the audience wishing to speak, please come up to the podium. Anyone? All right. Will we adjourn? Item 7, motion to adjourn.
Support.
There's a motion and support.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Next meeting is next Thursday.